Hey, welcome to today's tutorial. If you couldn't tell, it's about tripods. We're going to show you some tips and thoughts about using them to get sharper pictures. A generation ago, I'm talking 40 years ago, I worked for a New York City professional photographer. I listened to everything that came out of that guy's mouth. I was trying to absorb what he had to teach me and to become a professional photographer myself. One day he amazed me because he said, you know, if the subject isn't going to move, the camera doesn't have to move either. And if the camera doesn't have to move, the best way to mount it is on a tripod. I was shocked. In those days, I was a street photographer and I used to work in only black and white with a Leica in my hand, and I used to press myself against buildings on the streets of New York so that I could hold my camera a little bit steadier. But since that time, I've literally been on thousands of still photography sets and video sets and film sets and even a couple of feature films. And in every one of those instances, wherever possible, the cinematographer or the videographer or the still photographer has his camera mounted on a tripod. Mounting your camera on a tripod may seem like a real drag and a real slap in the face to your creativity. But the reality is that it will increase the sharpness of the pictures you take. It will give you a whole range of additional f-stops and shutter speeds that you can set your camera to. It'll allow you to have repeatable pictures where you can shoot more than one shot of the same thing, so you could do a bracket. And lastly, it'll allow you to exactly frame the picture the way you want, to make sure that you don't cut off an edge or that you don't come in a little bit too close. The only way to accomplish that is to mount your camera solidly. A moment ago, I suggested that using a camera mounted on a tripod would give you sharper pictures. And I sometimes think that all photographers are from Missouri, because Missouri is the show me state. They would want to know, they want me to prove it to them that putting a camera on a tripod will give you a sharper image. It's something that's relatively easy to do. All you need is a laser pointer, which you can pick up anywhere for 99 cents these days, and you can tape it to the top of your camera. I'm just taping this one here, and if you notice carefully, there's a red laser coming out of the front of it. Now I'm going to turn my camera around, and I'm going to aim it at the background all the way over there. Notice that on this tripod-mounted camera, the laser pointer is not moving. But if I take my camera out of this, and I hand hold it, you can see that the laser jiggles a little bit. Now, I have a pretty steady hand, but even though I have a steady hand, you can see that there's some jiggling to my laser pointer beam. The reason for that, the reason why it's so noticeable, is because if this is moving a 32nd of an inch here, or a 64th of an inch here, by the time it gets over there, it's moving a 1/4 of an inch or a 1/2 an inch. And that movement is going to rob you of image sharpness that you paid for your lens to deliver. If you put your camera on a tripod, you can get every bit of sharpness out of the $2,000 lens that you spent your money to buy. It's worth it, and you can prove it. Like so many things in photography, there are pieces of equipment that are designed for specific jobs. If you're buying a high-end tripod, a professional quality tripod, most times they don't come with a thing called the tripod head. This is a tripod head. This is a tripod head. This head is called a ball head. It has two controls. One control is for a pan, which allows you to turn the camera from left to right. And then the second control allows you to tilt or move the camera in any direction, left to right or forward, backward, just off of one control knob. If you're going to be shooting sports, or if you're going to be shooting people, or if you're going to be shooting landscapes, or you're a traveling photographer, this tripod head is more compact and easier to use and faster to use than this type of tripod head, which is called a pan tilt head, where this tripod head has one control to cover left to right and forward backward motions. This tripod head has separate controls for tilting, for tilting forward and backward, for tilting left and right, and for panning. Because it has those three controls, you can zero two of them, any two that you want, and still control the third one separately. The ability to allow them to be controlled separately allows you to photograph in the studio more easily. If you're doing methodical work, if you're doing studio type work, or if you're shooting video, the idea of having a head that has separate locks on each of the three axes that the camera can move through is a great advantage. In my studio, for the pictures that are in my digital still life book, I used a pan tilt head. When I'm shooting my portraits, when I'm shooting sports, when I'm shooting landscape, when I'm traveling, I want the lighter, more compact head that a ball head gives me. Both of them together can cover just about anything that I want to photograph. The same professional photographer who told me that I should be using a tripod when I'm shooting a subject that isn't going to move also said something else of interest to me. He told me that one of the things that you should do in photography is you should try to save your dollars and buy something once. An example of that is this Gitzo tripod right here. It's been with me for over 40 years. But because I bought a high quality tripod, that one tripod has been serviceable and doesn't break and lasts basically forever. The idea is that if you're going to try to buy a piece of equipment, you might consider looking for something that's strong and high quality and well built. Usually it costs more, but if you're serious about your photography, in the long run it might prove to be advantageous to do the more expensive purchase. A lot of photographers go out and decide to buy a tripod, and when they do, they'll buy a tripod that goes up to 7 feet tall. That's all well and good, but if you're only 5'7" or 5'8" like me, having a tripod that's 7 feet tall is not really helpful unless you're also going to have a stepladder with you. In general, you only need a tripod that's tall as you on your toes can be. All right? But a lot of photographers will turn around and use the center column of their tripod to gain a little bit of extra height. Here's the problem with doing this. This is 3 legs and it forms a really strong base. This is the equivalent of a dandelion, a stalk in a dandelion that would sway in the wind, because it is no longer a tripod supporting this camera, it's a monopod, a single stalk supporting the camera on the top of it. So, if you don't believe me, the whole goal is to try to use as little of the center column as you can. You might want to use this much of it, and that's not too bad. But the minute you move it to full extension, you're giving up some of the strength of the tripod and some of its stability. If you don't believe me, we're back to the show me state analogy. And one way to check that out for yourself is to get a blob of Funtac, which we've spoken about in some of our other tutorials, and put this blob of Funtac on the top of your camera like this, and then take a glass of water and stick it onto the fun tack. Now, you will find that when you release the shutter of this camera, just you touching this camera is enough to make the water move. If you watch the water when you take your picture, you'll see that if you jerk the camera, the water jerks, and when the water moves, you're not getting as sharp a picture as you can get from your tripod. You might want to test whether or not you get a sharper image with less movement of the water when you're not using the center column at all, and the difference between that and using all of the center column. Now, I know that we're all lazy, and it's much easier to lift the center column to its full extension than it is to extend the legs of the tripod. But if you can do everything you can to get your camera to be mounted close to this leg yoke of your tripod, you're going to increase the sharpness that you can get out of this tripod-mounted camera. And for me, half of the game is getting as sharp an image as I possibly can get. Since this is a tutorial about tripod technique, let's talk about how to set up the legs of your tripod. It might not seem like any big deal in which way they're set up, but if you were photographing outdoors, if you were photographing landscapes or skylines, or even doing portraits of people, you might find that it would be advantageous to set up one leg of your tripod, this leg, pointing towards your subject. Now, some of you might not think that this is really important, but if you were to do this, you would find that you would have a nice place for yourself to stand between the legs, the other two legs of the tripod. So, if you're going to be doing outdoor work, or if you're going to be doing night skylines, or if you're going to be doing landscapes, or if you're going to be doing portraits, you might find that one leg of the tripod should point at the subject. So now that you got that idea in your head, let's think about what would happen if we were photographing in the studio, because things get different there. Let's say that this is our subject and I wanted to shoot down on it. You would find that if you put one leg pointing at this subject, it would hinder how close you could get to the edge of your tabletop. But if you pointed one leg away from the subject, you could end up being able to aim the camera downward at your subject. Let's say that you even wanted to get further over the tabletop. One way that you could do that would be to change the length of one leg of your tripod. In this instance, it would be the leg that's aimed away from your subject, and that would allow you to actually change your camera position so that you'd be shooting more downward on your subject. Let's say that we wanted to shoot this item like this. We placed two legs against the front edge of our tabletop. One leg is pointed away and we extended it longer than these two legs so that we could get further out over the table. But even if we did all of that and we were photographing this product, it would turn out that this part of the table is closer to the lens than this part of the table. And because of that, it wouldn't give you an accurate representation of what this subject looked like. One way we could get around that would be by changing not the angle of the camera, but the angle of our tabletop. I'm going to lay in a sheet of plywood here. I'm going to come around to this side, and I'm going to put two metal blocks under my piece of plywood. These two metal blocks have changed the angle of my table. Now, I'm going to slip my white card back in, And I'm actually going to add a spring clip here to hold this down. I hope this is big enough to do it, like that. And now I'm going to put my subject here. By doing this, if you look carefully, you'll notice that the plane of my imaging plane of my camera, which is right here, is now close to the imaging plane that my subject is resting on. And because the two of them are parallel, this becomes an accurate representation of this subject on the imaging plane of my camera. Furthermore, because I extended this leg that's pointing away from the subject more than the other two legs, the center column no longer goes straight up and down, but instead tilts forward. And because it tilts forward, it allows me to get closer directly over my subject that I'm photographing down on. Some of you may think that there's only one way to get a photograph. And the way I just explained, by tilting the subject plane so that it was more parallel to the imaging plane of my camera back here, was the only way that I could get this problem accomplished. But a lot of professional tripods have an accessory available for them called a sidearm. That's what this piece is here. A sidearm allows you to extend the camera over a tabletop. Now, this may seem like a relatively weird thing to do, but sometimes it's the only way that you can get a photograph that you need to accomplish. The problem then becomes, once you've gotten into this position so you can shoot straight down on the subject, you might be higher than I am right now, but you need a way of being able to look down in the viewfinder and seeing what the camera sees. Now, some modern cameras have a video out where you could actually see on a monitor next to your shooting table what was actually the camera was actually seeing. But if you didn't have that cable, or your camera wasn't equipped to do that, another way around this problem would be to use this accessory, which is called a right-angle viewfinder. In practice, it slips onto the viewfinder of the camera, and it allows you to turn it around 360 degrees so that you could set it up to see from almost any direction. In a case like this, you might find that it would be smarter and easier to look and view your subject from the other side of the table that we're working on right now. And it would allow us to be able to see exactly what the camera's seeing, so we wouldn't be shooting blind. The only disadvantage to using this is that because the light is going from the eyepiece through another prism to this eyepiece, everything is reversed. Left is right and right is left, and up is down and down is up. So if you went to move the camera in one direction, chances are, and it was the direction you thought you had to move it in, chances are good you'd be moving it exactly the opposite way of what you needed to do. Finally, if this extension arm didn't get you far enough out over the tabletop or over the subject to get the shot that you wanted, Nikon and Canon and Zeiss, but only in Nikon and Canon mounts, make lenses called tilt-shift lenses. Tilting allows them to control depth of field through a very complicated process, which I'm not going to go into here. But shifting allows them to move the lens out and actually see past the edge of the frame. They would actually see more of the subject. It takes in a different part of the subject. So as you shifted the lens outward like this, it would allow you to be able to view this subject and see that it was centered in the frame. So you have now 3 or 4 different ways to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish here. And the last thing that's worth considering to complete this circle is that if you're going to use a sidearm, you can't put a leg of your tripod pointing toward your subject. Because if you do that, you find that you're taking a picture and you see that tripod leg. So like we did with the other previous shot when we were trying to work in the studio and we wanted to get close to the tabletop, if you're going to work with a sidearm, you have to have one leg pointed away from the subject. And the circle, it goes round and round. The last tripod tip I want to share with you in today's video has to do with stabilizing your tripod. Now, the tripods that I've shown you today and that I personally use, one of them is carbon fiber, but in general they're heavyweight, heavy-duty tripods. They're what is called professional quality. However, when you're starting out, you might be working with a lighter weight tripod, or if the tripod you're using is being taken on location and traveling with you, you might want to purchase a lighter weight tripod. One way to stabilize any tripod is to add weight to it. The heavier the tripod is, the better it is at quelling the vibrations that the camera makes when it's taking the picture. An example of this is a bag by the set shop that's filled with steel shot. This bag weighs 8 pounds. It's sort of like a saddlebag, and you can drape it over a tripod, and when it drapes over the tripod, it pushes out on all of the joints. And when it pushes out on all of the joints, it makes the whole thing more stable and more secure. If you ever were on a set of a feature film or a Broadway stage show, or even a lot of big still life studios in the greater New York area, you'd find that an 8-pound sandbag is not something that they even bother with. They use 22-pound sandbags. 22-pound sandbags are, the interesting thing about them is they make them orange so that if you're walking on a dark set, you don't break a toe walking into one. But I usually have pieces of nylon cord that have 250-pound pull, 250-pound tear strength, so that I can hang a sandbag over my tripod. Again, it's all in the ideas is because I want to stabilize the tripod. I want it to be able to absorb the vibrations that my cameras are putting out without them moving at all. As a hint, if you decide to buy these types of sandbags, or you decide to order them from Set Shop and have them shipped to you, you can order them without the sand in them. The very fact that you order them without the sand in them changes their weight from 22 pounds to probably about 8 ounces, which saves you a beaucoup bucks when you're talking about shipping charges. You then go to either Lowe's or a Home Depot and get a bag of play sand. Play sand is regular beach sand, with the only difference being that it's been put in an oven and heated up so that it doesn't have any crispy critters in it. Well, actually, the critters are crispy, but they're not alive and crawling. So you could buy the bag, which is just the bag. It has a zipper in it. And then you could turn around and fill it with sand at your leisure with sand that you picked up locally near you. The last thing to consider is that some young photographers don't have the money to invest in a sandbag when they first start out, even though they're really helpful. One thing that you could also use as a stabilizer for a tripod are 2 2-liter bottles of soda. Plus you get to enjoy drinking the soda. You drink the soda, you wash the bottle out, you tie a piece of rope around the 2 necks of the bottle, and then you can hang it like saddlebags over your tripod. Again, the idea is to stabilize the tripod. The last two I'm not even going to show you, but I'm just going to mention. If you're out in the field and you want to stabilize a tripod and you don't want to drag the weight of bottles of water with you or a sandbag with you, you actually have a perfect weight with you, and it's in your camera bag. It is your camera bag. You can take the strap of your camera bag and hang it over the tripod. Let me pull these 2 bottles of water off of here and just grab one of my camera bags. You could take this bag and hang it over the tripod, and that also would have a stabilizing influence on it. As another thought, today, because of the recycling and not wanting to use plastic bags, a lot of supermarkets sell canvas shopping bags. Those canvas shopping bags can be folded up and stuck in your camera case, and when you get to a location, you could fill them with rocks, or if you were near a supermarket, you could fill them with 2-pound cans of soup. They also could be hung from a tripod to stabilize it. So even a lighter weight tripod can be made more secure and more stable and be more able to absorb the vibrations that your camera are putting out when you're taking pictures. All of this, everything that we've discussed today, is how to get the most out of your camera and your lenses that you've put hard-earned money into buying. If you want the sharpest pictures you can absolutely get, and you're spending $2,000 on the best lenses that money can buy, it pays to think about getting your camera positioned stably and being in a secure way so that you can get every ounce of sharpness out of that camera that you paid for. Have a great night, and we'll see you again.